We have here today on the Moms Without Capes podcast a special guest, Sarah Snyder. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So, Sarah is a licensed therapist and registered yoga teacher turned elite embodiment coach in Hawaii. So, aloha.
Aloha.
She teaches ambitious professional women, many of whom are mentally exhausted working supermamas, how to optimize their brain and body for elite embodiment, health, and balance. Her Embodied Paradise Method integrates neuroscience, psychology, and yoga to transform hot mess mamas into cool, calm, conscious CEOs through neurohacks for emotional regulation so they can create their own personal paradise and embody the elite within without spending years in therapy. In today's episode, Sarah will be sharing with us all about her Embodied Paradise Method and how we can create our own personal paradise. So before we dive into that, I'm so excited to have you here. Let's hear a little bit more about your story and how you got to be where you are today.
Sounds great. So I am originally from the East Coast. I moved out to Hawaii when I was 23, maybe right after college, 22. And I was following a dream and my heart to work at a environmental education camp. I've always been a camp counselor. I've always had a love of like helping kids and helping people. And I moved out there and fell in love with Hawaii and just never left. I went to graduate school out there. I got my MSW. And then pretty much right after that, I started working as a high school counselor in a pretty well-known private school here on the island of Oahu, and loved my job. I got to do all the things that I am passionate about. And let's see, throughout those 12 years, I eventually met my husband. I got pregnant. And as I became a mama, I decided that I wanted to take a leave of absence from my school, which gave me this opportunity to start my private practice as a therapist. And so I started that in 2019 and just, found myself getting all these referrals, specializing with teen girls specifically, and young adult women just like really gravitated to me. And I love what I do within my therapy practice. It's been amazing. And as you know, we're in a bit of a mental health crisis. I think there's sort of a shortage of therapists and access to care. And I wanted there to be a way for more women to be able to access mental health education and to learn more about how to support their own health and wellness. And that sort of inspired me during the pandemic to create a coaching business. And it started fairly small. I just created my Women's Wellness Circle Facebook group really as a way to kind of hold space for women, as a way to have a virtual community online. And, we've been growing, it's been building. And over the last 2 years or so, my coaching business has really taken off, and I've been able to start working more one-on-one with women and actually starting my group coaching practice in emotional regulation for busy, burned out mamas. So it's a lot of fun. I love what I do, and I'm just incredibly passionate as a mom about helping other moms, as you are too, Onnie. So
Yeah, I know that we had a lot in common with that. Like supporting moms. We're
yes,
all about
yes,
it.
yes,
So
exactly.
because we know, right? Like, I mean, have
Yes,
that educational background plus the experience of being a mom that we
yes,
can contribute, we can add to, it kind of gives us a leg up knowing that,
totally.
we know what we're talking about, even though we struggle as well, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's safe to say, but yet we've learned some tools and strategies to be able to help with that, those times of over.
Yeah. And the thing I actually forgot to add, if it's okay to add this one last thing, which is a huge piece actually of my practice, is, I have, like you, so as a licensed therapist, like I have all those tools, right, which can translate to education and supporting moms. But the other piece, the thing that I did for myself initially was get my yoga teacher training in 2012. And
Mhm.
that has been huge for my own like personal, spiritual, emotional health and growth. But what I have realized in starting my private practice is actually the piece that I think a lot of therapists maybe aren't necessarily, like, we're not taught this as a trained therapist, is the piece around like physiological, like health, like nervous system
Mhm.
regulation and optimization. And so I've been learning that through my, my somatic training as a yoga teacher, and my practice like incorporates both. So I really love being able to integrate like the neuroscience with psychology and yoga as a way to support moms.
Sure, really like
Yeah.
the holistic health
Yeah,
and
the holistic health.
integrating. Yeah. We want to hear more. Let's move on to the Embodied Paradise Method. Tell us a little bit more about that and give us a bird's eye view about what that is all about.
Absolutely. So, I was talking about how my passion is really integrating these two worlds of psychological and physiological health to sort of bridge that gap. Um, and what I found, I live in paradise. My world is in Hawaii, so it's paradise 24/7. But what I have learned and realized through my own journey is really that paradise is not well, it is a vacation that you save for, right? Like you can absolutely, save up to come to Hawaii. But the truth is, paradise is an embodied experience that we carry within us. And we all have access to it. It's just a matter really of learning how to turn our awareness inward as opposed to outward. And most of the women that I work with, most of the moms that I see are, they're, overexhausted, overcommitted, um, overworked, they're overgivers.
They're just over
um,
it. They're over it.
they're over it, right? I mean, because our society conditions us as women to
Yes,
do more, to always
right.
be doing more, right? And so my embodied paradise method is actually about doing less to achieve more, meaning that and there's three parts, there's three pieces to the embodied paradise method, right? So the first piece, really, I mean, the simplest breakdown of it is really we are learning how to regulate body, mind, and spirit. But the sort of more the explanation that I love to give is really the first piece is we have to learn how to create safety in the body first through creating our own personal paradise, which is nervous system optimization, right? It's learning how to actually regulate our nervous system through soothing somatic practices. And there's like a whole host of those that I teach. These are the neuro hacks that I call them neuro hacks, because really we're getting at sort of hacking our own nervous system so we can get out of that fight or flight mode and access that parasympathetic rest and digest mode. So it's learning how to manage our stress through creating that safety in the body first. And once the body is calm, then we can actually learn how to regulate the mind and the mental processes. And that's where like learning how to consciously reframe our overthinking, anxiety, and all the like cognitive distortions that we as humans, as well as we as women, I think struggle with. So I see a lot of women that deal with perfectionism, people pleasing, codependency, like they all kind of go hand in hand, right? So a lot of what I do is helping women to learn how to set healthier boundaries, learn how to like reframe some of those unhealthy thought processes. But again, it's like hard to access that if we are in a state of sympathetic nervous system, like hyper arousal, right? In the
Right.
stress response,
Right.
essentially. So it's learning how to regulate the body, learning how to regulate the mind, and then learning how to connect to who we are really on a soul level. And that's where elite embodiment comes in. So I sort of came up with that term of elite embodiment because embodiment is all about coming home to who we are. It's about coming home to ourselves, to our body, to our mind, to our soul, right? And what I am just so passionate about is helping women to reconnect, especially moms, right? I think we as mamas tend to like lose our identity a little bit. We feel like we're just moms. And there is a period of time, and I
Right.
just went through it myself, where literally it's almost like not even our body. It feels like
Mm.
it's our baby's body, it's like we are
Right.
here to serve them. And so it's learning how to like reconnect to who we are on a soul level, a spiritual level, so that we can step back into our power and embody that elite version of ourselves. And I like the metaphor of a coconut, using a coconut as an example of
It's a
like, if
perfect
you think
one
of,
for the paradise.
right, like a coconut, we have these like hard, like husky kind of rough outer layers, which to me is like all the stress, all the trauma, all the dysregulation that we experience on a daily basis. But like if we can peel back those layers, on the inside of that coconut is just like juicy, refreshing, like, that's the elite part of us. That's that like part that we are just so longing to reconnect to. And that's really what my Embodied Paradise Method is all about, is helping mamas to like get back to who they are at their inner core, through sort of my methodology and through my processes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds amazing. Because I know like my program, it focuses mainly on like that middle layer, right? Like
Yeah.
although we do talk a lot about stress and like create like
Yeah.
bring in some strategies and techniques on how to minimize that stress, because you're right, you can't regulate your mind if your body is dysregulated. And so being
Exactly.
able to come away from that. And I love how you
Yeah.
put those three pieces together to
Hmm.
be able to get to help women get to their core. Because
Yeah.
especially like you mentioned, that identity piece is huge. We
Hmm.
get our identities completely shaken up by
Yeah.
becoming a mom. And then we get to the point where we're like, who the heck are we?
Exactly.
Because we've gotten so far from that core. And so that's
Exactly.
awesome. That's some sounds amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can we dive a little bit more
Yeah.
into like what what's one or two tools that you can share with
Hmm.
us as a way to
Absolutely.
kind of get moms started back onto that journey to themselves?
Yeah, totally. So I would say the simplest tool, which again is accessible to you at any moment, is your breath, right? And so as a yoga teacher, as a therapist, and as a coach, like this is the tool that I work with women first on, and a lot of women don't realize that. Um, there's a nerve called the vagus nerve that basically runs through the diaphragm, but also innervates like all of our organs, and it is responsible for helping us to regulate our nervous system. So when we take really slow, deep, like exhale breaths, the diaphragm releases, it sends a message to the brain that basically slows that fight or flight, that stress response, and activates the rest and digest parasympathetic relaxation response. And so what I think many of us don't realize is that when we're walking around in that like stressed out state, we're chest breathing, we're like in that very like that shortness of breath place, which is where we go when we get panicky, when we feel anxious, when we feel afraid. And many of us spend like most of our time here, which is why we don't feel grounded. It's why we don't feel connected to ourselves. It's why we're just like dysregulated. So when we can like place two hands on the belly, this is the simplest tool, is just belly breathing, two hands on the belly and just slowing down to take a really deep like inhalation into the belly, like filling the belly like as if it was a balloon, and then
Right.
releasing the breath so that it's a slow exhalation breath, right? So it's like a almost like an audible sigh that you let out. That is a way to hack your vagus nerve. It's a way to actually build what's called vagal tone, stimulate that vagus nerve so that we can train our brain and our body to basically learn how to like rebound from that stress response, to go from that stress state into the relaxation state a little more quickly. But it takes some conscious effort in the beginning, just like all new things.
Right.
And so there's a lot of like, I teach a lot of breathing techniques and tools as a starting point. A lot of people say to me like, Sarah, I'm not good at breathing, or I don't like breathing, or I don't like meditation, or
Right.
and I totally get that. And I think a lot of people don't like it because their critical inner voice comes in and tells them that they're doing it wrong. But
Mhm.
like, hello, guess what? It's your body. You know your body best. And there's no wrong way to take deep, slow exhalation breaths. I would say you're not going to have as much of a self regulation kind of result if you're not belly breathing as opposed if you're just chest breathing. So that's one really simple tool. But the other tools that I like add on to that slowly. Um, have you ever practiced restorative yoga, Ani?
So I have tried yoga quite a number of times, and
Okay.
I don't know. I just can't get into it.
I
I
couldn't get into it initially
I
either.
don't. I
Yeah.
tried, like, I've tried classes, I've
Yeah.
tried different ones. There is a class that I went to a few times that
Uh-huh.
incorporates yoga and dance, whereas
Oh, cool.
yoga, it's like fluid and
Yeah.
they play music, and that
Right.
I really enjoyed. But as far
Hmm.
as like the classes that I've gone to, like where you hold, I want to try hot yoga. That's my
Yeah.
next thing. Is what I'm trying, because
Okay.
I'm like, I'm just trying these different things because I'm like, I know it
Yeah.
is very beneficial. Like so
Yeah.
many people find it
Hmm.
beneficial, and I'm
Hmm.
like, I
Yeah.
want to like it, but I
Yes.
really do. And so right now, like the past
Yeah.
like few years, I've just been like trying different classes, like at the Y
Hmm.
and different studios
Yeah.
around here. So restorative, I'm not sure if I have. I don't know if I've tried that. Like if that's been one of the
Okay.
classes, because I just go to like different classes and I'm like, let me try this
Yeah.
instructor, try,
Right.
So
Right.
that's my story.
Yes, I totally get it. No, I totally get it. I think a lot of women and mamas feel the same way. I did not like yoga initially when I first went to a few classes. My first, and truthfully, I think for me, it was just about finding the right teacher. But I want to
That's
tell
what I
you that,
heard.
oh,
I've
it's
heard that. Like
huge.
everyone's like, just keep trying it, just keep like going to different teachers and
It's
stuff.
all about the
And I
teacher.
that's kind of why I did like that dance and
Hmm.
the yoga
Yeah.
fusion one, because
Yeah.
it was just slow music and it was more fluid. Whereas like
Yeah.
holding the poses, I don't have the balance for that. Even though like
Oh,
I
yeah.
used to be a Zumba instructor, like I
Yeah.
can balance, but just in that
Right.
static move,
Right.
I'm like, no. But
Yeah,
anyway.
I don't
I,
like the Iyengar style. That's not my style. So there's so many different types of yoga. What I teach is what I would call the dessert of yoga. It literally is restorative yoga, which basically means you lay in like these reclined postures. So you are not holding, you're not tightening, you're not sweating. You are accessing your relaxation response. You are in parasympathetic nervous system
oh, I
mode,
might like
right?
that.
You might like it is, I equate it to like laying in a lazy boy chair. You build your own lazy boy essentially, and you
Mhm.
rest in these reclined postures that actually lower your cortisol levels, that lower your adrenaline, that get you out of fight or flight anxiety mode into that relaxation mode. And we pair that and they're so simple. Like you hold in one of these classes, you only do like 4 or 5 poses for the whole class, like an
Huh.
hour and 15.
Yeah.
I mean, and so it's super restful, restorative, relaxing. And these are things you can do right before bed anytime in your own. So like
Right.
once you learn it, you can use them anytime, right? So like I'll give you a great one. Legs up the wall is one of my favorite poses where literally you
I
lay
think
with your
I've
butt
seen that.
against, you've
I
seen
think I've
it,
seen it on like TikToks and stuff.
totally. Legs are up the wall, but it's basically like it's a restorative inversion. So it allows
Okay.
you to sort of have like your circulation sort of changes a little bit because we're
Yeah,
reversing
because you've heard
gravity.
it. Yeah.
But at the end of that practice, so one is a restorative practice, the other one that I do at the end of that is what's called yoga nidra. I don't know if you've heard of that. If restorative yoga is like the dessert of yoga, rest- yoga nidra is like the cherry on top. It's literally a guided meditation. They call it yogic sleep, and it puts you in this like altered state between being awake and asleep. So you literally like your brain waves shift out of their normal like whatever it is beta wave into sort of alpha like awake and relaxed, and then all the
Kind
way
of like
into
falling
theta.
asleep on the
It's
beach.
exactly like
That's like
that's
what I'm
exactly
picturing.
what it
Like
is.
that
And then
state.
you nailed it. That's exactly what it is. And so you sort of come in and out of that. There's so many studies that have been done on it, and they say that 1 hour of yoga nidra is as restorative for your body as 4 hours of conventional sleep. So
Huh.
I don't expect anyone to do an hour, but like I have
Right.
practices that are like 15, 20 minutes. I even have an 8-minute one on my website, right? And the idea is that the practices incorporate intention setting, gratitude, systematic like rotation of awareness through the body,
Mm.
visualization. So it like uses a bunch of different practices that we know as mental health practitioners
Right.
are very effective, right?
Right.
But we're doing it in a way that feels non-threatening, that feels like, oh, it's something we can just surrender into and relax
Yeah.
into and melt into as if we're on the beach. Yeah, exactly. So it's incredible. And again, it's just one of those tools to like have in your back pocket. Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, no, both of those. The breathing, back to the breathing one. How
Yeah.
often do you suggest?
Uh-huh.
Because I know there's been days where
Yeah.
like, where we don't even take a breath. Like we spend our
Yes.
whole day like in just like that normal, like,
Mm-hmm.
that's one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that you're saying about like the
Yes.
objections to the breathing exercise. Like
Yeah.
I can imagine people being like, well, I do breathe. I breathe all the
Yeah.
time, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
something that
Mm.
you have to actually be intentional about. So when you are
Yes.
working with moms, how often,
Yeah.
because I know like we should be
Yep.
making it more intentional, like not just when we're
Mm-hmm.
feeling stressed, we need to practice these techniques when we're calm so that
Yes.
our bodies get used to what that
Right.
feels like, that relaxed
Right.
state. So how often would you suggest somebody who's starting out, who
Yeah.
wants to start out with like the breathing or the inverted wall posture?
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of nailed it that we want it to be proactive, not reactive. We want you to like learn these techniques when you're not in a dysregulated state. So it's
Right.
easier when you are in a dysregulated state. So I would say if you could, I mean, anything is better than nothing. You don't need even like, it doesn't even have to be 5 minutes a day. It can be 30 seconds in the morning before you get out of bed. It can be 30 seconds in the middle of the day. During nap time. It can be 30 seconds before bed. We're talking small periods of time where you just bring awareness to the breath. And what most people don't realize is literally there's a part of the brain that's called the insula that is responsible for that like awareness of our internal state. And a lot of women and humans don't make time to even bring consciousness to their internal state, right? And
Right.
what we know is that the more that we do that, whether we're naming our feelings, whether we are slowing down our breathing and just bringing awareness to that, whether we're grounding through our senses, each of those builds consciousness. And when we build consciousness, we activate our upstairs brain, right? That frontal lobe that's responsible for all the good stuff that we want more of: judgment, planning, decision making,
Right. Right.
long-term thinking,
Functioning.
delayed
Yeah.
gratification, like all the good stuff. So we want to do that, I would say, as often as possible, but even if you could just start with 30 seconds a day,
Right.
it makes
Right.
a difference. I mean, and that's the reality with meditation too, is that you don't have to meditate for 30 minutes a day. You can do 30 seconds a day and actually build a tolerance for that awareness that you're holding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And still get the benefits from it.
And still get the benefits.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, that seemed like a good time because right before we
Yeah.
hit record, you had
Yeah.
shared with me about your book club. So that
Yes.
seems like something that could be incorporated, the
Yes.
habit stacking. Why don't you
True.
share with us about
Okay.
your
Yeah.
atomic habits, what you're reading?
Yeah. So
Although by the time this is published,
I
it probably
know
will be past that book club
that's
or that
okay.
book selection, but there'll be another one. But go
There'll
ahead.
be another one. Yeah. So we have a mental health book club that meets quarterly over Zoom this year. And we are on and reading Atomic Habits right now. Actually, we're meeting this weekend to discuss it over Zoom, although we have a little chat going, a group chat where we've been talking about the book for the last little bit. But absolutely, like one of the things that James Clear, the author, talks about is that idea of habit stacking, which basically is this concept of like building into our what we already have as a routine, adding in these small little habit changes. And one of my favorite things that he teaches is this idea of the 2-minute rule. So rather than feel like, oh my gosh, like whatever the habit is you want to get started with, feeling like that's so overwhelming, I don't know where to start, and then we just avoid it, which is actually all or nothing thinking. The idea is we want to break it down into like this tiny bite-sized chunk, right? So, like for me, if I want to get up and exercise in the morning, I lay my clothes out the night before. That's my 2-minute habit that I start. And when my clothes are there in the morning, I'm way more likely to put them on, right? Or as part of my routine, my habit stack is after I get up, I use the bathroom, I brush my teeth, I immediately put my workout clothes on and roll my yoga mat out, and like, boom, I'm going to do it because here I am, right? So
Right,
it's
right.
a way to build that, like flex that muscle, but in a like small, not intimidating kind
Achievable
of
way.
way, a
Yeah.
very achievable way.
Yeah.
So the other thing I'll just say is for the next quarter, what we have coming up is the book Burnout. And that is absolutely like, I'm really excited about that book. In fact, yeah, I don't know if I want to jump ahead to talk about that now. I can hold that. I'll say more about that in a little bit.
Okay, so Is there any other advice or anything that else
Mhm.
that you want to share with us that you think would be helpful?
Yeah, I mean, so I teach a lot of different tools, right? I some of the moms that I work with don't have babies; they have teenagers, and they're like, "What do I do with this teenager who's not listening to me and who's right?" And so, some of what I teach, I mean, first is we have to learn how to regulate ourselves. That's the first piece, right? Before we can expect that our child is going to be regulated. And so, us learning those self regulation tools is so critical to our children being able to like follow off of that modeling. And I would just say a couple things that, I see a lot. Because we're busy mamas, we don't always we forget to like stop and slow down and like look our child in the eye and put our devices down and really listen to what they're saying. Like we get frustrated with their behaviors.
Mhm.
So a suggestion is to put the devices down, look your child in the eye, hear what they're telling you, to actively listen and empathize with them. And that's kind of the missing piece. That's one of the things I also teach is empathy, how to actually really put ourselves in someone else's shoes. Listen to the why behind your child's behavior. Why are they acting out? Why are they doing what they're doing? And what's the feeling behind that? What are they feeling in that moment? And so many parents miss that piece just because we don't think about it, right?
Right. We're
So
busy
I
too.
we're busy,
We're busy and
totally.
it's hard to like stop and really pay attention
Yes,
and step into that other person's shoes to see where they're coming from.
exactly,
I'm thinking of an
exactly.
example just yesterday and I struggle.
Yeah.
It's just
Oh
stuff
my
like
gosh, we all
like
struggle. Me too.
like
Yeah,
being aware of it and realizing like, yay,
yeah,
this is not always going to be like this. And
yep,
it's
yep.
hard at times, but it's definitely worth it.
Totally. And so
Yeah.
that's really what I think. I mean, that would just be the last little thing is, um, another great book I would recommend to a lot of parents of teenagers. I don't know if you've read this one, but The Explosive Child by Dr. Ross Green. It is
Hmm.
an amazing book about collaborative problem solving, and it walks parents through this process of like basically active listening, empathy, learning how to like hear what our child, their perspective on a problem, giving us an opportunity to share our perspective, and then
Yeah.
coming together and inviting them into that problem solving like
Right.
process, so they
Right.
get to actually be, they get their voice heard. And
Yeah.
that I would say, if there's one takeaway for parents, it's that we all just want to be seen, heard, and valued, right? And so
Including
if
our
we can
children.
learn to
Yeah.
do that to our children, for our children, that's
Hmm.
huge. But sometimes we have to do that for ourselves first,
Right. Right.
and that's the piece that I think a lot of us miss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's switch over and I want to hear
Yeah.
what you do for fun.
Yeah, totally. So speaking of self-regulation for myself, so well actually, as part of this whole atomic habits thing, I'm right now doing like this 21-day workout. So I would say a self-care practice that I use and I try to use as often as possible. And right now I'm on like a really good streak. is it's just moving my body, is exercising, right? And sometimes that looks like dance parties with my family after dinner, sometimes that's a morning workout. Right now it's a morning workout, sometimes it's a walk on the beach. It can look like a lot of different things, but movement, like daily movement, I would say is a huge self-care piece that I do for fun. But really anything that involves the ocean for me is fun. So like, this past weekend we went boogie boarding with my 4-year-old, and that was
Do
super
you
fun.
surf? Do you surf?
I have surfed. I would not call myself a surfer.
Okay. Well, we had just gone to Hawaii and
Yeah,
I had
yeah,
taken surf lessons back in
yeah.
California back in like 2012 or 13 or whatever. And I was always like my dream to like learn how
Yeah,
to surf. We'd go
yeah.
down the Jersey Shore growing up and I'd always be
Oh, right
watching the
on.
surfers. I had a
Yeah.
surfboard at one point. I dream of like owning a Jeep with my surfboard out the back. Like,
Okay.
but
I
I
love
just
that.
I have these visions.
I
And
love
my
that.
husband's just like, here I am living in Montana, like totally
Yeah.
landlocked. He was trying to talk me into getting a Jeep, but
Yeah.
I'm like, this is
Oh
not
my
how I
gosh.
pictured my Jeep. Like I didn't
Yeah,
picture it in the mountains. I pictured it on the coast. But
of
anyway,
course.
when we were in Hawaii in February, we
Yeah.
I took surf lessons again,
Yeah.
and so here I am, like 10 years older than I was when I did it before,
Hmm.
and I had gained some weight. My teenagers,
Yeah.
twins. 15-year-olds, they jumped up, like they were up. I got up one time in the whole like hour and a half or 2 hour lesson. I'm like with the surf
Yeah.
instructor, like, does your back hurt? Because he was kind of older. Back and
It's a lot of neck and back, right?
my
Yeah.
neck from like laying on the
Yeah.
board on my belly
And
and like
paddling.
looking up like this the
Yeah.
whole 2 hours. And like, I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah. It's such a workout.
this might be a dream I might have to abandon.
It gets easier the more you do it because you build that muscle, but it's
Yeah,
super, oh yeah, it's exhausting initially.
yeah,
Except
yeah.
for when you catch that wave, right? It's like
I
so
know.
fun to catch that wave. Yeah, that's
But
awesome.
anyways, so
I love
what
that.
you recommended to us a few books, but do you have
Yeah.
a book that has impacted you or that you would like to share aside from the other
Yeah.
two?
Yeah. Well, actually the book that I would really like if there was one book that I could pick to share with moms, it would be the book Burnout by Emily Nagoski. And I just would say two things about the book. One, um, the book is really about understanding like your stress cycle, but also your like emotional process and how, and actually speaking of waves, like one of the things she says in the book that I just love is that emotions are tunnels. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what I've always taught my clients is that emotions are like a wave, right? It's like we have to learn how to like ride the wave of the emotion before it subsides. And I think so many people avoid dealing with our emotions because they think it's too painful or too like uncomfortable. So we never learn how to like complete our stress response cycle. And what she teaches is this idea of you got to move through the tunnel.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you get stuck. And if you
right.
repeatedly get stuck in the emotion, that's what leads to burnout.
Yeah,
And so it's a really powerful book and very, very empowering. It's actually all about sort of how we as women manage stress in very different ways than men, for a lot of reasons. But so I highly recommend that book. I mean,
yeah.
I know
Okay.
I mentioned it earlier, but
Yeah,
game
yeah,
changer.
it's that good. And I'm
It's
really
that good.
curious with
Yeah.
your embodied paradise method, because
Yeah.
you used the metaphor of the coconut and
Yeah.
now you're using the waves. Do a lot of
Yeah.
your things, like a lot of the metaphors that you use within your system have to do
Hmm.
with
They do.
like I
They
love that
totally
that
do.
you just use
Yeah.
the wave for that.
Yeah. But it works, right? Like it really does.
Yeah.
It's like learning how to ride the waves of emotions that we
Mhm. Yeah.
experience. Yeah, so I do. I totally, I
Yeah,
don't even do it
that's
consciously.
great.
It's,
But that's
yeah,
great.
yeah,
You have like this whole theme. I love it.
yeah. That's what
So
embodying paradise is all about.
yeah. So Sarah, where can listeners find you?
Yeah, totally. So, I have two websites. I have a therapy website, but my therapy practice is full. So I have a coaching website, which I think will be in the description, aboundingcircles.com. And I actually have a whole host of various things there. You can find me there. You can purchase, I actually have radical self-love affirmation cards that I'm love and are really wonderful for moms and daughters. And as well as a whole bunch of other resources. And I would say free like yoga nidra practices, meditations, restorative yoga poses you can check out under my resources tab on that website. You can also join my Facebook group, Women's Wellness Circle, which I think there will be a link for that. And on my website too is a link to join the Mental Health Book Club, which for quarter 2 we're going to be reading Burnout. So
Awesome. All right.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much. It was
yeah,
such a pleasure getting to know you. Thanks for being our guest.
yes. Thanks for having me.